Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news discussion and, of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works and the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is David.
I was expecting that I was going last. Thank you, Eric.
No,
I am Windrunner on the forum, and I was just watching Argent's little gymnastics finisher that he was doing there in the opening. There it is.
Welcome, audio listeners. Argent was doing a little almost conductor show. Not quite, but that's what it's called, right? A conductor show.
That's what you call it when the orchestra is playing. Yeah.
I know a lot about music, and that I don't know anything about music. Also joining us is Evgeni. What's up?
Hi, I'm Argent, and I have a show and tell that I will show you later, and it has nothing to do with the episode.
Cool. And lastly, but not leastly, we have Marvin, who's been working all day to fix the website, which God, wasn't our fault. Wasn't my fault, actually.
It wasn't our fault, yeah.
Remember 3 months ago when the website went offline?
Yeah, that was this. That was this.
I'm Paleo, and I would have something or someone for show and tell today, but they are asleep.
Why don't you go check if they are in fact still asleep after our hour of nonsense that we do before the show? Why don't you just make sure? Because if they're awake, then yeah, I think you should.
Just a moment.
Yeah.
And now we have Calic joining us straight from Shadesmar.
Hey, what's up? What's up,
Calic? Do you have any comment on the whereabouts of Bado Mishram?
I'm grumpy.
Used to be good with words.
Yeah. Pleading the fifth. All right.
Well, I wonder what's going on with that stone thing that's breaking behind him,
I felt like the Herald portrait started with pretty reasonable, I could see this in a church, and then the second round we were like, what is this? All right. It's not bad, but I think they are a little more
cool. Yeah, I gotta say though, the Poly's good.
Is it the green one?
Yeah, the green one.
Yeah. I think the Poly and
by the same artist who did.
Yeah. That's why these were the Rhythm of War reactions 1 and 2.
Oh, there we go.
Cat! Oh, it's a tiny kitten!
Sometimes they get away.
You're muted.
Okay, yeah.
So who's this?
She doesn't want to stay here. This is Daisy. No, she does want to stay here.
Okay, that's fine. We got to see the kittens. Yeah. That's all that matters. It's very important.
The other one looks the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, it's there's a single difference between one of them has a darker spot on her shoulder, and that's about it. So it's been hard telling them apart, but yeah.
Yeah, should they have one difference so that you can tell them?
Oh, yeah.
I wonder which one this one is.
Really helpful.
Yeah, when they're the same color, yeah. Because Ayona and Sky, they're totally different, so I can always tell them apart. But I am Chaos, and Evgeni, you have some show and tell too. What do you got?
I went to the dentist and got free toothpaste.
Wow, I gotta say that was not as impressive as Marvin's kittens.
My top 3 options were we're going to be talking about stone shaping today.
Are we going to go name through the varieties of toothpaste? That's what's going to happen right now?
No.
I think it's going to be options of off-topic things that got not chosen.
Yeah, no, this is the best, by the way.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, so option 1 was stone shaping. I'll get stoned. And then I remember that I don't like getting stoned, and I've never gotten stoned. So
then you definitely don't know.
This was not going to be a feasible option. Option 2
was going
to go to the backyard and get a stone. So option 2 was going to go to the backyard and get a stone. And then I went there and there were no stones that were interesting enough to me. I channeled my inner
How interesting are stones generally?
Did you put water on them?
There are some neat ones.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can, smooth stones are ones I like a lot. Or at least a lot more than rough stones. Skipping stones, for example, are fantastic. I love skipping stones. But I didn't have any. I had boulders.
So you went with toothpaste.
And so I was like, well, yes, I will look for something in my room and I will show that off. And it was between a toothpaste and a water bottle cap. And the toothpaste felt marginally more interesting.
Wow. I'm so glad this is in the episode. That's great.
That will not be cut for time. Yeah.
if depending on what type of toothpaste it is, you can shape the stone that are your teeth with it.
Yeah.
Probably don't
Yeah.
want to though. That sounds not good for.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it polishes the stone
Mhm.
that are your
Stone
teeth.
pot.
Yeah.
Teeth, the order of teeth polishers.
Yep, that's what we're going to talk about today, everyone. We're going to talk about teeth, lots of teeth, Singer teeth, all the teeth. No, that's not what we're going to talk about. I'll just look at the YouTube
Teeth in the
analytics
Cosmere.
and people will just be like toning off. I'm like, nope, not interested. Not at all.
No.
True. Yep. No, we are going to talk about stone shaping, a topic in Rhythm of War that also we've tried to record this podcast a few times, or at least schedule it. We haven't like formally recorded it, but we've attempted to schedule recording for this like 4 different times, Marvin, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
There is a really cool chapter in Rhythm of War that has a ton of implications. And so Venli uses the Surge of Cohesion. You're right? Yeah, because
It's
the bondsmiths have the tension one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and they use it
Like,
to great
so-
effect
so-
constantly.
Yeah, so you remember that because like Dalinar is always so tense, right? So he has tension.
That's why he has a tense butt. It's a
Mhm.
surge bind.
Yeah, that's it's look, with cohesion and tension, you got to come up with like mnemonic devices and shortcuts to remember those.
Yeah, Dalinar's butt. So that's why Dalinar has that surge. Right, makes sense. But Venli has cohesion and can do a thing called stone shaping. But see, the cool thing with stone shaping is not just really what she's doing, but we got some stuff in the Ars Arcanum and some very tantalizing hints of stuff way back. Way back in what the stones themselves say to Venli. That is some cool stuff.
Does that mean the tone also canonically has a tense spot?
And a cohesive one.
Argent's just like not listening to what I'm saying at all. Just waiting for a chance to just get that out there.
I think you said something about Dawnsingers without saying the word.
I didn't say Dawnsingers, but yes, Dawnsingers had magical abilities, which like we sort of knew that like maybe the Dawn cities were made by the Dawnsingers, and like there's the somatic stuff, but like pretty clearly they had magical abilities and pretty extensive ones at that. It seems. So that is what we're going to talk about today, stone shaping and what happened in the past. Dun, dun, dun.
in the dawn times.
You mean you could call it the dawn times, though? That's actually very reasonable. Just add dawn to this prefix, and then you're set.
Cool. So instead of beginning at the dawn times, which happened at the dawn of time, when
But they
time
didn't,
dawns.
though. But they didn't, though. It's
No,
after they
because the
announced
shattering was
Saturn.
before that.
Yeah.
But
So you forget that we are on Roshar, and Roshar
Only cares about
is very
Roshar.
Roshar centric.
That's right. The shattering is negative 2,000 years previous or something.
Yeah.
Who cares?
So let's do a thing where we talk briefly, asterisk, about the basics of stone shaping, what stone shaping is, what it can do, kind of the high level ish things that we know about, and then we're gonna dig into the details of how things work, and then we're gonna look into like how stone shaping fits with like the world and the history and the culture of things. And on the path there, we're gonna go on like 17 different tangents, one for each of the 17
question.
shards.
As the name suggests, stone shaping allows you to shape stone, but also
That's really the hard-hitting analysis that that our viewers want, really. I mean, we did say that we were talking about the basics, so that checks out.
Yeah.
Tune in next week when we talk about will shaping, where you shape wills.
But you don't do that. You shape stones.
Yeah. It's not limited to stone, though. It apparently can extend to all matter, apparently. And as we've talked or said before, it's the application of the Surge of Cohesion on Rosha.
Yes.
Like you might have it on other planets as well, like as a sort of basic idea of how it works. For instance, it's related to Yolish microkinesis.
Oh, is this like the first
anything about?
Is this like the first time we're talking about microkinesis on the podcast? Oh boy!
No, it's not, because I struggle with this word every time it comes up.
Oh, that's true. We have had that, yes.
And I remember the trauma.
Yeah. And should we say what microkinesis is?
What we know about microkinesis? Like I'll abstain from microkinesis talk because
that's fine. I would say in a thimble, the amount of knowledge, that's the amount of knowledge we have right there, is a Yolish magic system that allows people to manipulate axons, not atoms. Apologies.
But basically
directly.
atoms.
Yeah, directly. And and potentially, based on some of the stuff that they're hinting at in this Ars Arcanum, they might have touched off some nuclear disasters at some point. But
whoa!
Nuclear fission seems to go hand in hand with microkinesis.
Can I read the sentence that about that? Because that sentence is really freaking cool. It says,
"Sure.
Fortunately, in my explorations, it appears that stone shaping is far less explosive of a power, bound by the rules that honor placed upon it to protect from the mistakes that happened on Yolan."
It's just a mistake.
I guess Brandon really did want some fundamental forces, and if it's like strong axial connection, I mean, like, I guess if you're blowing up atoms, then like, that would be a nuclear reaction. So I don't know really how that relates to shaping stone, but sure.
I think what the distinction is that like or stone shaping only works on the bonds between atoms. Like you can manipulate the crystal structure or whatever of the material you are affecting, but with microkinesis you can go one level deeper and like on the level of protons and neutrons and whatever the equivalent in the Cosmere is in XC.
Protons, of course.
Yeah, I was wondering about this exact thing, right? Because to really get like nuclear kind of level of energy and explosions and things, which seems to be the case with microkinesis, you need to break the atom down. Yeah. And if you are only manipulating the bonds between atoms, then you are like by definition not doing that, right? Yeah. But if cohesion is defined in the Ars Arcanum as the strong the force of strong axial interconnection, right? Then it feels to me like by implication, and this could be a big assumption here, but it feels like tension, which is the force of weak axial interconnection, would go inside the atom. And like that's how you would get explosive. Unless this is referring to like ionic and what's the other type of atom
ionic
bond?
And covalent?
Ionic?
Oh, ionic and covalent.
I was like, ionic?
Yeah. Covalent.
I'm like, what is in Dockor? Where are we going?
The Dockor interactions of the molecules. It's like you don't get that in the intro chemistry classes. You got to go up a bit. You take a few creative writing classes too. Lit classes.
That's how the core monks actually power their abilities. They share. Like two monks get together and like the external bones of one just snap over to the other.
Yikes,
and that's how they share.
Moving on from that.
Anyway,
that's how we circle back to teeth.
I would say that in response to Argent's opinion that we were just discussing, I think that if you treat the naming scheme of what Brandon says these powers do literally, there might be something there. I don't think Brandon has an awareness that there's a strong and a weak nuclear force, and I think he likes that idea. I don't think that is like carried through in the magic, so I feel like what we have seen described of tension, like, which has always seemed incredibly useless to me.
Yes,
is
correct.
Like creating a shield out of a blanket. You have shard plates, but I'm sure that blanket shield's great. Doesn't seem like you're messing with the nuclei of the atoms. It seems like you're doing something else to make something flexible, rigid.
Also, I just gotta parse out like the strong force. If strong axial interconnection is supposed to evoke the strong nuclear force, then that should be dealing with nuclei, and the weak nuclear force should be about radioactive decay. That is not what the surges do on Roshar at all. So
well, it seems that they're messing with like electromagnetic bonds, which is a different force than either of those nuclear forces.
It's not the strong or the weak force at all.
I think there literally is a warp where like somebody asked Spren if they're related, and he's like, "Oh, I just like the sound of it or whatever," and took it as inspiration. And
having a strong and a weak force,
which is fine. I have no issue with Brandon, getting inspired by science things to say things. So like, I don't know how literally we need to take these, because it's clearly not the strong and weak force. Also, those would be ridiculously powerful surge finding powers anyway. Like, Jesus.
I can see someone in the future of the Cosmere who's like a dual major of arcanist and physicist. Just being extremely frustrated by the fact that there is a strong and weak nuclear force, a strong and weak axial interconnection,
and they
have nothing to do with one another.
How do the nuclei get together? I don't know. It's not the same force at all. That's a quote from the Silverlight novella. I don't know if you know this. I'll see you in 30 years for that.
But I think what the sort of distinction that there is between those two interconnections is that with if you basically manipulate the strong interconnection, you actually break down the material somewhat, and they allow it's possible to reshape it completely. While with the weak one, it's more the like loosely coupled together, and you can make it rigid or soft. And
I'm still very interested to see how tension's going to be used.
Of course.
That's something that I've been very unclear. Like, how is making stone liquid different from making stone soft? Like, because presumably you can apply the surge of tension to stone. Like, it doesn't have to be water or cloth or whatever.
Well, it seems like half a power to me is what it seems like, where one half lets you make rigid things pliable, and the other half lets you make pliable things rigid. And you can only like do that and then let them revert. Like, I don't think.
Yeah, but it's clear that like Venli can do quite a lot with just the one surge. So I don't know. I think we just need more information on how tension works and how it interacts. Because like, I think I sort of understand cohesion. I think.
Yeah. Cohesion's comprehensible. If Brandon were to have a different idea about what tension should do, and he had a better one, and it just appeared in the books, I wouldn't be upset. Or this will be really cool and I don't understand it. But
it might end up having, and this is just completely off the top of my head, but it might end up having something to do with like the durability or strength of the material, right? So with I was going to say stone shaping, and then I corrected myself, but no, stone shaping is correct. With cohesion, what you can do is like someone is shooting bullets at you, for example. And what you can do is you can touch the ground, which is made of stone, and like liquefy that stone and raise it up in like a pillar or a shield made of stone, and then let that stone solidify again. So you are like playing with putty, but it's still stone, right? With tension, I don't think you can do that. But I think if you already have that pillar or shield of stone made by a cohesion user, maybe what you can do is you can make it strong, like very durable, unbreakable stone.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we'll get any answers on tension for a long time. So
hey, let's put it down our searches.
Yeah.
For that example, I feel like what tension would do is you make the ground really wobbly, but not so that you would sink in. Like you could make it bouncy almost.
I am the surge of bouncy castles.
Sounds amazing. You can have somebody sink in. It's like what the distinction is to me. But yeah, I really no clue. That might be the case.
Ooh, so let's dig a little more into the Ars Arcanum. Also, fun from the last spoiler stream, because there's a line that's I send my best agent to embed in the Stonewards. That's Naz. Nice. Naz might be a Stoneward. Sweet. We'll see how well that works out, but
it is extremely amusing to me that what may have happened was like literally days before. Well, no, because she writes the Ars Arcanum after the events of Rhythm of War, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that doesn't work. What I was gonna say was that it's really amusing to me that like Chris sends Naz and he goes to the Stone Wars and then immediately falls asleep because of the events of Rhythm of War.
Oh, that would
but
be
the
that
timeline doesn't work like that.
No. Yeah, so there is quite a few interesting like aspects that like the Ars Arcanum emphasizes. Its willingness, connection, and command. And so in willingness, the stone seems to be uniformly willing to obey the commands of a surge binder attuned to cohesion. That's an interesting turn of phrase in itself, attuned to cohesion, but sure. And Chris says, this is curious as stone is often among the most difficult of materials to work with in soulcasting, even more difficult than living beings. So why is the stone so eager to change for a Stoneward or Will Shaper? What about it makes it so likely to respond to their desires, to incorporate them, and to enjoy the result? So that's not like a Cosmere term necessarily with the willingness. It's just an odd thing that Chris is noticing, that the stone really likes being manipulated with this power, I guess.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree, but there are... So there are things in the Cosmere and in the various arcana that are pretty like well defined and strict, like the spiritual attribute, for example, the ideas of identity and connection and things like that. These are fairly rigid in that they are things that exist, right? Yeah. And then there are other things that have significance and actual measurable effect in the Cosmere, such as perception, that are not as quantifiable, or at least we haven't seen them be quantified in any way. And so I do wonder whether this willingness is a similar type of thing, where it is a measurable thing and it has a go away fly, and it has a thing, it has an effect, but it's not a thing that you can point at in the spiritual realm, for example. And so the reason I bring it up is because it is very possible that this factor of willingness might have an effect in other magic systems in the same way that perception does. And the example that Chris brings up is, well, in soulcasting, everything you attempt to soulcast, like there is a measure of will to whether you are able to soulcast something or not. Or someone.
Yeah, I just don't know why this would be the case for the stone. Like Chris doesn't know, so like I don't know if we're going to get anywhere with that. But
so maybe it has something to do with the stone. Like stone, also in real life, is sort of always this symbol of longevity, and like ancient structures made out of stone still exist today, and that basically the stone was always has been a part of Rosha, and it has stayed stone for millennia, while other stuff that you can soulcast easily, like, I don't know, grain or whatever, it's not old, it's relatively new, and it is more willing to change completely, because through transformation change it into something completely different. While with cohesion, you just change its shape, but its core stays the same.
It's still stone.
So it's still stone. And you help the stone become more beautiful and whatever with the cohesion. So it's more willing, or it's really willing to get changed by you. In a way, is how I could see it.
That's an interesting thought. Another way I was thinking about it too was, I definitely agree with you that I think the reason stone is difficult to soulcast is because it's because it's rigid, it's stone. We think of it as being impermeable. And I think the way that people think about the stone and the land probably impacts it a lot. And one thing that I would say is that, well, stone does change shape. Like that's a thing that happens to rock. Like erosion and the reworking of rock is kind of an inherent part of rock. And so there is a way that you can think about it as rock changing shape is not as outside the nature of stone as stone turning into air.
Yeah,
which
right,
is
exactly.
a little bit more of a dramatic transformation.
I really like that explanation, actually. That's that fits really well for me. That rock, I can change shape for you. That's just fine. I like changing shape, but don't change what I am, though. You can't do that. Like that makes sense to me.
It does make me think about or think along lines of, well, how would stone shaping behave on worlds where stone is not the dominant feature of the landscape?
I mean, I don't know necessarily how much the perception of like Roshar's land being stone necessarily matters. Like, I still think people generally think of as stone as solid, right? Like that's generally people's impression of stone, right? But sand is tiny rocks, really tiny rocks, right? And it breaks down eventually.
The other similar line of thought that I had was about stone shaping materials that, for whatever reason, have been perceived as like unchanging or rigid or so. For example, if on a world made of titanium, for example, would titanium be something that stone shaping might be able to affect more than, I was going to say aluminum, but that's a terrible example in the Cosmere.
Let's not use that in the Cosmere.
Some like soft metal.
Silver. No.
Oh, great. Watch our WoW episodes to hear us freak out about aluminum and silver.
Yeah, I think that's a relevant question, though, because like it's interesting to think about how does stone shaping work on other materials that aren't stone? And we know Brandon wants to do sci-fi stuff, and Radiant's peeling their way through a spaceship skin can be pretty cool if they're just kind of able to be like, I'm opening it up.
Wow, that would be really cool. Yeah.
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 Here's Windrunner Johnny.
Yeah, because like metal doesn't really have necessarily that erosion aspect to it. Like whereas like stone, it does naturally change shape due to like the wind and the rain and the waves, right? Whereas like metal kind of doesn't, but also like it can rust. It depends on the metal and things.
I mean, I would argue that metal is inherently more pliable than stone in people's perception because of the understanding that you can like forge it and smith it and like just physically bend it in some cases.
That's fair. Yeah, okay. Wow, I'm surprised we got such a good answer for willingness. I think this almost has to be how it works. I don't know. I'm very satisfied with this. Connection, though, is a very spicy one where the stone can sense the intent, capital I, of the Surge Binder, even their past. I have reliable reports of stone reaching back through generations of connection to display events, feelings, emotions, and ideas from long ago. It will create pictures of events long forgotten. What I initially dismissed as an inferior form of microkinesis is indeed much more focused and in some ways more remarkable. There is a divining property to stone shaping I had not thought to find. This was like the crazy part about reading these stone shaping parts of Venli. It's just like, oh, we're hearing things from the stone saying like from thousands of years ago. Like if humans were there for millions of years, probably the stone would have stuff to say for like millions of years, potentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this is what makes this like, I'd say we'll have a podcast about this, really. Like,
Yeah.
without this, stone shaping is like, oh, cool. But like, it's not
a podcast.
It's not a podcast. It's like, oh yeah, it's their power.
Yeah, we don't do a podcast on like edge dancer healing or something. It's like, wow.
Gravitation, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Ooh, look at him go. Like, this is pretty, I did not anticipate. Yeah.
Very fun. Yeah, like it's this and the implications that the stones say to Venli. That's like, that's where we're going to really get into this.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense that the stones could remember these things just for like how sturdy stone is in a way. Like, I don't know, that kind of makes sense to me in an intuitive way almost. It's interesting how Chris is surprised that this is there, but it's almost like a spiritual thing, right? Like you're not just adjusting the physical of the stone, you're sort of connecting to,
I mean,
like your soul a little bit.
Yeah. And it almost reminds me of how, like, when Vin picks up preservation, right? She senses, oh, this is what all the other people with the power did. And it seems like with the stone, you're sort of feeling like, oh yeah, all these previous stone wards and stone shapers, right? Almost.
What I don't necessarily disagree, and I think a spiritual connection obviously is a big deal here. What I am thinking is more in terms of, not in the sense that it's more important, it's just where my thoughts went, more in the direction of the cognitive realm. Because
she looks into Shadesmar, right? Venli does.
She doesn't at the moment.
Well, she sort of like peers in a bit. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
that
but
could also be transportation. No.
I'm just saying that she is looking into Shadesmar a bit, and that is, they do mention that she can't go there, but she can look into Shadesmar.
Yes, that is an ability that she has, but it's not what I'm thinking here. What I'm thinking is about the cognitive aspect of stone, right?
Sure.
So you are in a mountain somewhere, or you are in Eurythero, which is a reformed mountain.
Okay.
And how big is the aspect of stone, right? Like you are touching a mountain.
Yeah.
How many?
Oh yeah,
right?
and it gets into the question of what is it like talking to?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We'll talk about the Spren of Stones at some point later, or Spren of Mountains.
Absolutely.
How if there are relatively few compared to other spren or entities of stone, then unlike other things like trees and buildings and palaces and things like that, like that might give you this kind of long memory associated with stone in general.
Yeah, right.
Because the entity that you are in contact with,
is
even
vast
though
and
some
enormous.
bits of it may have like eroded or been chipped off or whatever, a lot of it might still like date all the way back to however long ago.
Oh yeah, well it certainly does, because it's only been a couple thousand years, which is an eye blink.
Yeah,
and we explicitly get a mention of in fact, let me find the exact passage, because I think it's just like a couple of sentences
about
Yeah. So there are two kind of relevant chapters where Venli does important stone shapey things, and in one of them what chapter is this? Is it 38? It's not 38. That's
I have no idea. We don't have
83.
chapters.
It's at the very bottom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's 83. Venli is like secluded on a floor in Eurythero, and she's starting to explore her powers a little bit. And the chapter goes, the stones had not been created by the Spren. She's thinking about the sibling.
Yep.
Though a grand project had reshaped them. Reshaped the original mountain that had been there before. The stones remembered being that mountain. They remembered so many things, blah, 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 blah.
Argent, you're totally right that this is cognitive stuff and not spiritual stuff. I agree. You're totally right.
But I think the visions are coming from the spiritual realm.
Oh,
you can't throw
just...
that out. It's reading that connection. So,
Yeah,
but I think she is interfacing with the cognitive aspect of the stone, and that stone is responding to her spiritual connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, how cool is it though to just be like talking to a mountain? Like that's one of like a deep fantasy sort of concept that is like, I love fantasy sort of things like that, where like, oh yeah, you can talk to a tree, but like that mountain has seen civilizations die away, and anyone who's perceiving the mountain would usually just associate that's the mountain. Right, like you don't think of it as like separate
rocks.
Right, exactly. Like you're generally grouping it as like, oh, it's that peak over there, right?
And I think that was such like we've got a pretty good understanding of the cognitive aspects of just like regular objects and how they exist in Shadesmar, at least on Rashar. But with like big things like mountains and like the land itself, I think there is room for some of those rules to be a little fuzzier. And like she can be talking to the spirit of Urithiru, but that spirit wasn't presumably the place where the singers that she sculpts walked over the land. It didn't see that, but it can be connected to the larger cognitive concept of stone in general and the planet Rashar, and see a lot of things that maybe didn't happen in that particular area.
Yeah.
I think the biggest cognitive entity we see is the Kolinar Palace, which has like a dedicated bead that Yasna senses in her interlude.
Oh, geez. Right.
Not interlude, sorry, prologue.
Oh, yeah. I was like, interlude? What? We didn't have an interlude.
Deleted scenes.
Yeah, that's exactly where I went to. Like, oh, the deleted scenes? Like, yeah, I totally remember. Go watch Ben's video. He did a video on it. It's very short. It's nice. We're gonna get all into all the implications of what the stone says, because it's so good. It's so good.
Before I sense the intent to move on. Before we do that, maybe
maybe you should actualize that intent.
I will whack you with a stick. Do we think,
whack him with a stone,
just as an opinion, I don't think it matters that much.
Okay.
Do we think that the visions that kind of Venli sees or manifests using her stone shaping, right? So she's touching the stone and the stone is like undulating, which is a beautiful word. And it's showing like Dawnsingers doing things.
Yes.
Do we think those are actual memories that the stone is showing her, in that there were like actually this many Dawnsingers constructing these buildings with these tools? Or is it more of a, which would be more of a cognitive direction to things? Or is it more of a spiritual direction of things, where the stone is conveying the idea of Dawnsingers living in harmony and doing stone shapey things, and the exact number of Dawnsingers or the exact buildings they were created is not that important?
I think it's a combo, and like even Chris in this connection section in the Ars Arcanum is like, it displays events, feelings, emotions, and ideas from long ago. So I think it can show specific events that like the stone perceived, like the mountain perceived, I think, right? I think it could do that.
Well, if it can show faces, like faces is specific. That's about as specific as you can get. And so it definitely can show specific things.
Yeah. But I think it can also show like general impressions of what the people felt like around it, and like sort of connecting to that ideal. Because like, I mean, this is in the connection section, so maybe it's all sorts of connection shenanigans there. So I think it's probably a combo of cognitive and spiritual stuff.
So because the stone sort of also tells Venli to remember, and then all those things from her past well up, I feel like it's almost like the stone sort of provides the rough framework of the idea of what could have happened or what happened back then, and then it's more like Venli providing her own experiences and sort of filling in the gaps and creating this image of the singers, whatever. And so it's like a combination of both the stone contributing like these emotions and ideas, and Venli herself putting something of herself into it, because she's the one who is shaping the stone.
The way you phrased that immediately made me think of Dalinar's visions or the Stormfather's visions, where the Stormfather is providing a framework, a spiritual framework, and then the person experiencing the vision is like bringing in their cognitive little house that they plop in there and like fill in with context that is relevant to them or specific to them.
You love that word, Brandon. It's so good.
I love it so much.
See, I don't know if I even necessarily agree with that, though. Like, I agree about the cognitive framework thing, but I definitely think that the Spren is capable of showing her specific things and ideas. And I think what we see with the Dawnsingers do in their civilization is more a way of life that it is showing her. But I wouldn't be surprised if the sculptures of the singers walking away show them as they looked when they left. Like, that would not shock me. If it can show faces of stone wards long dead, it can make a sculpture of people walking away that is also accurate.
True.
That's fair.
It's also just crazy that in Rhythm of War, Chapter 67, Song of Stones, I guess that's not called stone shaping. Maybe I said that earlier, but this is just talks to her. It's not just impressions. It's just like actually like I am speaking, or at least Venli's perceiving it like that, right?
I mean, in the same way that like I'm a stick is speaking to Shalang, right?
Yeah. But how cool. We will get into all of these things very shortly. Let's just read the very last thing in the Ars Arcanum, which is not very interesting. It's about command, and it's that the Stone Shaper must often make a command, mental or verbal, to truly control the stone. And it says it's like other arcana in the Cosmere. And it's not that novel. And then Kriska is into talking about like, maybe the it's funny that she refers to the mountains as which is kind of interesting, but it's like, their current queen like discovered anti-investiture. That's crazy. It command the creation of anti-investiture, but that's not this podcast. But I mean, it makes sense that you got to make some sort of command there. Not surprising.
Maybe a little surprising, because that's not necessarily something we see the Windrunners do. Maybe they do, but we haven't really
intent command. Like what is intent? What is command?
Where's that solo video, Eric?
Sometimes, like when he does his like reverse lashings, is like super focused on saving his team, and like that's is that enough? Like he's like willing something to happen, and I think that happens unconsciously. But like he can also stick a pouch of gems to the side of a barrel by accident by just meaning to set it down. So
even with Venli's stone shaping, it's not like Venli is consciously telling the stone to now change. Like it's that conversation where it happens, and it just naturally starts changing because she has got that intent, and the conversation sort of is the command almost. It's not actually anything where she says, now do it.
But I think if she wanted a specific thing, then
sure, but it's not a specific, like similar to the lashing case. It's not like a command, like it's not an actual command. It's just like, I want this to happen now. It's my intent, and it happens. So, yeah.
The previous item in Ars Arcanum, the one about connection, I think, talked about the stone being able to sense the intent of the Stone Shaper, which makes the command bullet point, I mean, it's not a bullet point, but whatever, notably weird, because I'm also thinking back to the scene where Venli frees Lift from her prison. And I also don't think that Venli did anything like commandy in that scene. She just kind of touched this. That's the beginning.
She's mostly just like pushing her hand into it. Like she's just trying to get in there, and she starts pulling it apart. She's not really
commanding.
Able to. She wasn't expert enough to get it to move on its own into the shape she wanted. It usually did what it wanted in those cases, such as forming the tiny statues on the floor above. So for now, she simply pushed her hand forward until it hit air on the other side. Then she pressed with her other hand and pulled the two apart, forming an opening straight through the stone. The normal hard rock.
She's still like willing a thing, so that this is not that surprising to me.
It just seems like a basic application of the will. She wants to put her hands into it. She wants it to move when she touches it, but she can't do it any other way.
I think when she gets better, she will need more specific and precise commands.
I can get behind that. What we see her do seems more in line with just raw intent. But I can get behind the idea that if, as you are trying to do more interesting things, more interesting than just like shoving your hand through stone or like scooping up stone like water, then you need to be more precise with like the same way when Kaladin reverse lashes a rope to attract just the span reeds that he's trying to get. That's a very specific, like, I wouldn't say that is just, raw intent. He needs to visualize exactly what he wants. And so I think when we get to a point where Venli or other stone shapers start doing similar things, then we might see more of the command showing up.
I guess I'd just say, like, in that Venli section that we just saw, that like intent and command often can be quite fused in these simple applications. And so
I don't think,
right?
I don't think it's always worthwhile to try to pry them apart.
Yeah. I think for the more complicated things, I think it will become more obvious.
Yeah, I think you can basically say like the command for the simple stuff is intuitive and implied, more or less. And once you start getting into the complicated stuff, you have to really think about it.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and so we've been talking about cohesion with sort of in context of like Venli, and the Radiance, right? But the fused and the what are they called? The Fanaim, I think.
No, that's Raboniel.
Oh crap!
Nexim are the teleporting ones.
Nexim is the pursuer.
Maxim.
I think it's the Maxim.
Oh no, those are the deepest ones. Yeah.
Oh god. We didn't put this in our outline, so I'm like, the deepest ones.
Too many M's, but not the one from Trinity.
Not the Trinity one.
The Risharan deepest one.
I mean.
Look, if we can have Dor the Singer.
Oh no.
But anyway, the fuse that use cohesion,
the cohesive ones.
Cohesive ones, yes. Oh yeah, the Makayim. Yeah.
Makayim.
Yeah. I had to go to the Coppermind article because I'm like, I do not remember those names, but the deepest ones. They used cohesion quite differently in that they sort of like meld with the rocks and then they just sort of flow through them, which is very interesting.
And Raboniel describes that as them like melding their very axes with those of the stone, and that's how they go through. Which is
I think that what they say really is like most atoms are empty space, and so they're just like aware of that, and they're able to just like I guess their nuclei are not bumping into each other, their electron clouds are not getting tangled up or whatever.
There's no electromagnetic force repelling all of these individual atoms.
It's magic.
No, that's fine.
Don't think about it too much.
It's cool though.
It's super cool.
It's like
Yeah.
Also, I don't remember if this is canon or headcanon. But I in my head, when they are doing the approach towards Eurythero, right? So all of them are walking, but those ones of the depths are sliding through the ground. In my head, they're like ice skate, but so they're not ice skating in that they move with their legs. Like they've planted their feet into the ground, but the rest of them is above ground, and so they're essentially like standing there with their arm crossed, but they're moving forward like on a conveyor belt.
Yeah, that's how I imagine it.
That's so cool. Like it's just such a cool image. I love it. Also, I love it when the tower comes on and they're just frozen there. Like that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a bad way to go. I guess it's got to be as instantaneous as anything to have your body suddenly realize that it's fused with stone. But,
they're just cosplaying as the 9. You know.
Right. Yeah.
Oof.
I mean, Void Light can apparently sustain the 9. So but the 9 are.
Yeah.
They're just encased in stone. They're not like the stone is not through them.
Yeah. Yeah, sucks for those guys, but oh well.
Shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
I know. I was wondering how do you get rid of them? Like, do they like later? They're just like, sorry, this is part of the floor where there's like a fused with it, so it's just a little.
I feel like those fused would need to die and then just be reborn, and the singer corpse is just
still in there. Like, liquefy the stone and like stir it out, like just
yeah. You need like Venli to go deal. Yeah,
Yikes!
Oof. The siblings like I don't like these corpses in me.
Not a fan.
But I also don't think the sibling can like eject them from the walls because they don't seem to have like that fine of a control. Because like there were secret doors throughout the tower, but all of them had like you had to. They
were
had
like
a gem
stuff.
activator.
Yeah.
So it was more like electronic sliding doors than the sibling intentionally moving things around.
Yeah. Oh wow. It's like one of those things that's like horror movie stuff. Like 10,000 years from now, the Earth here is abandoned or something, and we're exploring it again. It's like, oh my God, there's just a corpse just hanging out from this wall. That doesn't. It's like I see the part that's decomposing, and the other half is melded with the rocks. It's like, I'm not a fan of that. That's creepy.
I'm sure Venli feels bad enough about her extermination of her people, so she's going to want to make whatever amends she can by scooping corpses from walls.
She's out of Eurythera. She went back home.
They have an oath gate like in the next neighborhood.
I mean, that's true.
They're visiting. They're gonna be very close neighbors.
Yep. I don't know if we have much to delve into with the fused. I do think we'll do a fused podcast eventually about how comparing all the surges and how they're different.
I said talking about how sad it would be to be attention fused.
Yeah.
We can try to speculate on what the active use of their power is.
Nah, let's save that for a fused episode.
Well, okay, I will just say
I also don't have any ideas.
Yeah.
Well, but to me, the active use of their power is just using the surge like the Radiant would. So I'm sure it's just them being able to displace stone instead of sliding through.
Oh, yeah, that probably, yeah.
That's what I would have, like, that's the only guess that I have.
I think,
to
me, that seems like how that works.
Yeah, same with like the Shaniam moving around and like they can do a lashing.
Mm-hmm.
They just,
and that usually power.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about it at all.
So let's delve into talking with some stones. Song of Stones. Oh my goodness, where do we even start with this? Like in chapter 67, Song of Stones, like the stones are like radiant. We've missed your touch radiant, presumably, because radiants have been gone for thousands of years. Venli's using Void Light, so she can use Void Light for her base, for her radiant abilities if she wishes.
And I don't think that changes anything, so we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah. And the stones are like remember, and like figures are made with stone, shaping them. And then Venli sees the Dawnsingers working with the stone, creating cities. Tools. They didn't need soul casting or forges. They dip lengths of wood into the stone and come out with axes. They'd shape bowls with their fingers. All the while, the stone would sing to them. And it's like, welcome home, child of the ancients. And then Venli asks the key question. How? Radiance didn't exist then. Spren didn't bond us. Did they? Things are new, the stones hummed, but new things are made from old things, and old peoples give birth to new ones. Old stones remember. Oh.
There's a bit that we skipped that I think is going to be
do it
interesting to either talk about right now or just make sure we don't forget later.
Sure.
And it's when Venli first touches the stones and performs stone casting, stone shaping. There are ripples that go out, and a tone surged through her. Then it began to pulse with a song of a rhythm she'd never heard, but somehow had always known. A profound, sonorous rhythm, ancient as the core of Roshar.
The rhythm of Roshar, Argent.
I guess.
Potentially. That is a possibility.
That is a possibility, or some kind of a rhythm of stone.
Do we want to get into just the old Dawnsingers powers? Because God,
always.
I do. I've wanted to talk about this for a long time. I can't remember if we talked about it near Rhythm of War's release, but this is a huge deal, really. Like Dawnsinger abilities pre-Desolations, really. Like the Dawn City is a pre-Desolation, right?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
or at least humans are seemingly.
Yeah. Humans are presumably on Ashen, messing things up, and the singers are just kind of, this is what their society looks like before things go wrong, is my understanding.
Yeah, before everything goes wrong. And the interesting thing is also in Rhythm of War, there's a reference to the singers betraying the Spren. The Spren in Lasting Integrity talk about this. What Blended says is they betrayed us long ago, referring to the singers, but never on the scale of humans. So the Recreant says a bigger betrayal. But
it's not a murderous betrayal by the singers. But
yeah, but something happened. And that's just very interesting because what we've sort of heard, at least since Words of Radiance with like the listener songs, is that the singers felt like the Spren betrayed them, at least in giving radiant powers to humans. That because
they call the Stormfather a traitor as well.
Yeah.
And we talked about exactly this in our either Heralds or Desolations episode.
Something like that, probably.
And one of the ideas that we either agreed on, or at least that I liked there, was that back in those ancient times, we were looking at two, let's call them betrayals. Before we even get to like the Recreants, right? We're talking about Dawnsingers and Spren, where both parties feel wronged by the other.
Yes.
We talked about the idea that maybe, some Dawnsingers went and did something, and some Spren or all of the Spren were not okay with that, but they didn't break up just yet. And then later on, the Spren decided that, that thing that they did, that's actually bad. So we're gonna go help the humans instead. And that's the thing where the Dawnsingers are like, they actually betrayed us first, because they are forgetting the inciting incident.
Sure. Or not wanting to admit that the inciting incident was a valid reason.
Yeah.
I do think that it's relevant, though, that Leshwi does say the Spren have forgiven us. That's her question for Venli. Yep. And so at least one of the fused who has actual memory of these times considers the Spren to the singers to be in need of forgiveness by the Spren.
Yeah, and Leshwi was like just so overcome with that. Like it was a huge deal. So I have a question. What do you think the Dawnsinger powers looked like, and how did it work? Because I have an idea, but I'm curious what your ideas are. I'm very pleased with my idea. Personally.
Okay. How about this? The surges are less rigidly bound on early Rashar. Maybe they have an affinity for stone in particular. Maybe there are other powers that float around. We know that from the Elia Stele, they reference power of Spren and surges that are forbidden to us. So maybe this is what they're allowed to do. They're not able to go further with it.
Okay, interesting.
And what's been given to them. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here. And, maybe, and this is before I think Radiant Spren had like the official 2 surges that they might have been associated with, at least super clearly. And maybe regular Spren are capable of doing small things too, like we see with Rock, who presumably is drawing on some of that same singer form stuff to do what he does. So that's vague, but there you go.
I think I agree with David that like they are mostly the basically the same abilities, just less limited as well. Like sort of similar to how we had the Bondsmith Unchained on Ashen, probably, and it's the same with the singers on Rosha before Honor came there, even when Honor still was there, and there weren't these rigid oaths yet.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's this aspect of if you have more specific abilities, you can generally do more things with them. Like Stoneshaping is more limited, but you sort of gain things out of it compared with Microkinesis, right? Where Microkinesis is so broad. And so maybe they could do less, potentially, because they don't have these oaths, and the oaths are kind of like superpowering these surge binding abilities much higher, maybe.
Yeah, it's like tying them more closely to the Spren as well. Like I think bonding their souls more closely together, which lets them do more elaborate things.
See, my theory is very simple: that the singers simply receive forms from what would be in the future Radiant Spren and gain certain abilities from them. Presumably lesser abilities, because the weird thing with building cities is like a Stone Ward can't do that, right? Like that's just so, like the cities are so big that it feels like what you would need is you would need a bunch of these singers with these abilities sort of working in concert, and maybe like there's like a big rhythm, and that's why the Dawn cities are having like these specific patterns, right? Because they're like singing a big song to like raise a city. Like it probably requires a lot of them working together. So like these old powers, I mean, maybe a group of Stone Wards could do that now, but maybe just because they're humans and not singers, they're not as in tune with these like rhythms and things, maybe. But they couldn't do that.
That was going to be my question: is do we think that singers have a unique like intuition for this power that lets them get away with things more intuitively than your average human would be able to?
Like, because she is feeling rhythms in this, and special rhythms, and so maybe a human is a bit worse at it. I still think the rocks would probably talk to the humans as well. Like you get that connection, but you just wouldn't have that aspect of you'd feel these things but not really understand or process that they're rhythms, maybe, but Chris doesn't mention it. She doesn't say like, they speak to the Spren of the Stones. She says, the stone shows them things. So maybe that's the degree to which they're communicating, is the stone is just like, look at this, and they're like, the stone is showing me something.
I wouldn't necessarily say that either species is better or worse. I do think it's reasonable that the singers and or Dawn singers would hear these rhythms as they work, and the humans won't. But I don't think that's an inherent benefit. I think it can be used as a benefit. I kind of have this picture in my head that the human stone shapers are, what I'm thinking here is Urithiru used to be a mountain.
Yep.
And is now not. And it was not created by Dawnsingers that way. So this was either the heralds doing a thing, or the shards doing a thing,
Right.
or a whole bunch of surge binders doing a thing.
Probably the shards, honestly, in creating the sibling, but like it's unclear, right?
It is unclear.
Shards. You know,
The sibling is kind of.
Yeah, the Radiants could not make the sibling for sure.
Yeah.
But they do talk about like the Way of King. I think it was the Way of Kings, or maybe Words of Radiance. Discusses where to place Eurythero, and so.
But they were like asking honor, or it's a
It
little
doesn't
weird.
say that they were asking.
No,
So
they
book-
wanted to put it in
To the west, closest to honor, right? Yeah,
Places
that's what it
closest
says.
to
Mhm.
honor.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And so it is possible that the shards still did the thing. And like, so the shards came down and were like, pick a location, any location, and we'll form a city there.
Mm.
And so the humans were like, well, let's pick a place that's closest to honor. So he doesn't have to Uber quite as far because the price of gas is insane right
But
now.
he's riding the high storms every place. he gets there anyway.
On the gas prices.
Yeah, that's right.
But it could also mean that like human surge binders were deciding where to do this thing. And if that is the case, if Eurythero was shaped by humans and then the shards just like injected the sibling in the tower, because remember all the crystal veins and all of that stuff that permeates the entire tower, this is the manifestation of the sibling.
Yeah.
Like the sibling is not just a Spren that lives in Shadesmar that like speed dials into the physical realm to talk to Navani. Like the sibling is there physically.
Is the Eurythero bait practically? Not like exactly, but like yeah.
not the stones. Not the stones. It's like the skeleton of the tower.
Yeah.
I don't think that comes in later. I feel like that happens as you're building it, because it'd just be weird for me to see the crystals like, you know, you would have to like re-soften everything for the crystals to be able to like work.
I think
their
it's
way
got to be
through.
shard stuff.
But my thinking was, if it's human stuff, which I actually like better than shard stuff in this case, when a bunch of human stone shapers work together, they like they can construct this tower, but it doesn't have the same kind of coordination that is almost otherworldly as the Dawn cities, which are like this fundamental pattern that is on a manifestation of a rhythm almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
The Eurythero is just a tower. Like it's not a
cinematic
tower
object.
Yeah.
It's not cinematic, but it's like you can conceive a normal person with no powers building like a small version of Eurythero. Like they don't need to know how a rhythm manifests.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. So I have some questions about my theory because Jess and I, like probably over a year ago, had a long conversation about the theory that I just said on several implications of just the idea of these sapient Spren providing singer forms. So there's a few questions that I know Jess had. One, why would the Spren do this? And why do they not do it in the future?
Here we go. Because I was about to say something about that.
Yeah.
I think that there's a really good moment in one of the singer songs, I think in Words of Radiance, where they talk about the singers are the Spren's broth, but their meat is men.
Yep.
And I think that possibly, like, we don't really know how Spren work or whatnot, but for whatever reason, if Nahel Spren are wanting to spend more time in the physical realm and maybe interact with the physical realm a little more, they could be getting something out of being the Spren granting a singer a form. And that's good, but then they realize, well, I could just Nahel bond these humans, and that's even better. And I get to have more control in this realm and more presence
More
here.
meat.
Exactly. So I think that could be.
Yeah. And then they just, because maybe the Radiant version is like strictly better than the thousands of years ago version, but pre-humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe just the Spren just thought, I mean, here's a natural mechanic to that I can get to the physical realm, but that was pre-humans. They didn't realize that there was this other option that you could even do. Right?
And why they couldn't then bond a radiant, do a radiant bond with a singer, but now can, is something that will be interesting to learn more about at some
Because
point.
wasn't there something that maybe Honor didn't want that to happen?
That might be a wob. That might be in the book.
There was like an implication that I vaguely remember.
So there was a thing. There was a thing about what is possible and what is not possible in the Cosmere.
Right,
and especially in magic systems.
Yes.
And it's not that the hell bonds were inherently impossible. It's that what was possible in surge binding was kind of it's a bit like what is it called? Subconscious biases or unconscious biases, where it's not that you are actively prohibiting something from happening or thinking that something is impossible. It's just that you were not even thinking about that thing.
You didn't know you could until you did.
Yeah. And so Honor wasn't even thinking about Nahel bonds at all, period. And then once some humans and Spren came up with the idea and made it, they didn't make it possible. They essentially made him realize that it was possible all along. Then it kind of settled as a formalized thing in the magic.
But then why couldn't the singers do the same thing, I guess? Like, why couldn't they make Honor realize something was possible that he thought was impossible? Like, to me, it seems like it would be that much harder.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because there's one aspect that maybe the Spren were still butthurt about whatever the singers did, which we don't know, right? We have no way of knowing. And then they're like, this seems strictly better. I could have sworn that there was some implication that maybe Honor didn't want there to be singer radiance. David, I do think it is a wob.
I think I'm remembering it. I think
it's like not a super recent one.
No, it absolutely isn't.
Yes,
a lot of historically they did not.
Historically, they did not.
The friends that create the orders of Knights Radiant have not in the past been attracted to Parshendi because of certain events in the past. And
here's one too.
Okay.
Words of Radiance, March 2014.
Ooh, yeah.
Ash and I going to be a Radiant. You mentioned in the beginning there's going to be 10 books, 10 Radiants, and Ash and I's book is one of them. Rip Ash and I. That's me. That added that bit. Brandon Sanderson. And so in the past, Parshmen were not allowed to become Knights Radiant. However, what I said might imply that could change.
Yeah, so okay, so that's what I'm thinking
allowing. Of. Yeah.
That makes me think that it's Honor not allowing it. And like what changed? Like Honor died.
That makes more sense to point out
that the way I'm sitting right now, it looks like I have cat ears.
You do look like you have cat ears. Argent, I think you'd look great with cat ears. I think that it's good.
There are podcast watchers that up until now thought Argent was wearing cat ears until this very moment.
Yeah. Put in the comments below how much you like Argent's cat ears.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Honor didn't allow it for whatever reason. Presumably just due maybe. I mean, Honor is the person enforcing oaths, right? And so if the singers made a promise to Spren that weren't like the Radiant oaths, right? Because they wouldn't be those, and they broke that oath, Honor would be pissed, right? And and during his lifetime, he'd be like, no, you cannot trust those people, right? Like Honor would be the shard that does that, right?
Well, and Brandon said on several months ago live stream when you're listening to this
2 days ago from when we were recording this, but
that Honor is, and comparing the factions of Odium and Honor, that Honor is much more the one that would like rigidly enforce something where if you were betrayed, you never trust them again / maybe try to exterminate them. So maybe he's like, we're just Like this is their just desserts. They don't get Spren. We don't give Spren to traders, as if the Spren don't have any agency.
Which is probably why some of the singers are like, wow, this honor guy's an ass. Like, I'm gonna go with Odium at least. Like, he's less bad than this horrible thing.
Yeah. Honor seems to be a 0 to 60 in 1 second type of guy.
Oh yeah. My dad's like that. See, I know all about honor. My dad's exactly like that. Everything's fine. You broke a thing, dead to me. Like, that's exactly how that works. He's fun. Yeah, so maybe like the Spren, if they were in a Singer Gemheart, can perceive the physical realm much better, but they can't like move around and stuff, right? Like they're in the Gemheart, if that is how that worked, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible that the Spren, even when they're bonded to a Singer as a Radiant Spren with a Radiant bond, still aren't quite getting as much of a draw into the physical realm as humans. Maybe they will with higher oaths or not, but like I still think Scylla's on the point of being able to basically almost interact with the world like she's a regular person.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of getting to that place with Kaladin, and I could see maybe that being less easy for a Spren bonded to a Singer if there really is some qualitative difference about what they gain from humans versus Singers.
We know that the Singers are themselves more in the cognitive realm as well, like conversely, so it would make sense for them they get a bit of the physical presence benefit from the Singers, but obviously not as much as from a human who's fully in the physical realm and like can pull you more, sort of, because there's more weight on the physical side almost. So very wishy-washy, but yeah.
I don't think we exactly know that. I know this has been a very, very popular. It's not even a fan theory. It's almost like a headcanon that all of us have. That humans are just more into the physical, and so they can pull a Spren more into the physical. Or conversely, Singers are closer to the cognitive because we see them see more of the cognitive itself. But
isn't there an
all we
epigraph,
have is
I
mean
you want I have the epigraph one. I have it. So the epigraph, because we have referred to it before. The Spren betrayed us, it's often felt. Our minds are too close to their realm. That gives us our forms. But more is then demanded by the Sparta Spren. We can't provide what the humans lend, though broth are we, their meat is men.
That's good we read that. That's a good one to say.
Yeah.
Can I read this second one as well? Because I feel like it's also relevant. Because it's immediately the next thing. But it is not impossible to blend their surges to ours in the end. It has been promised, and it can come. Or do we understand the sum? We question not if they can have us then, but if we dare to have them again.
That sounds like the dangers of surge binding type stuff.
Yeah, with understanding the sum. Yeah.
Yeah, like they don't really understand what we're doing with this. Do we dare take them?
And so in that first one, where they're like, we can't provide what the humans lend. I really wonder if there's an aspect of the Spren are just very offended with this dire betrayal. And I don't want to minimize what the Singers potentially did. I feel like they probably have a pretty good reason for it, right? The fact that Leshwi was so emotionally holy crap, are the Spren forgiving us? That's insane. That clearly was a big deal and probably was talked about for thousands of years. Until the Recreants, where it's oh, there's a much bigger one now. But I wonder how much of it is that the Spren didn't want to interact with the Singers due to that betrayal. Maybe honor wasn't allowing them to, and maybe they just did this Nahel bond with humans first, and it just seemed a bit easier to do and to avoid those issues. It's probably a combination that's not necessarily, oh, the listeners can never provide what the humans can, because that's not true. And I feel like I don't necessarily even agree that the Spren can't be pulled into the physical more necessarily. It's just we see Venli and Venli's bond, they just talk through the rhythms because that's natural to the singers, right? I don't know. It's hard to say.
I guess. I mean, she can't interpret it perfectly, even though it's just a rhythm. Like she basically is getting dialogue that we're not seeing. Is how it seems to converse. But I do think that there is, like, you know, we're reading an ancient song. There's reason for the people to be wrong. But I do think when they say that their minds are too close to the cognitive realm, I think that is it's not like a negative thing. It's not like a value judgment, but because of the way singers work, because an inherent part of their biology are these spren bonds, their consciousness exists with half a step into the cognitive realm. And maybe even just with those very ancient Nahel bonds that had not been formalized in any way, maybe it doesn't matter now that they've got the oaths. But I do think they would get less out of a Nahel bond to a singer than they would to a human. Whatever benefit they're getting.
That is a weird aspect of surge binding pre-radiance, right? Like without the oaths necessarily like being thrust upon them, right? Like that's a weird time in the timeline of like what that looked like, you know?
Oh yeah.
And like in these songs, it seems like it's forgotten that they used to have these powers, like just completely, right? Like it says it's been promised and it can come. Like, so maybe there's like a memory that, I mean, we did used to have these surges.
Okay, here's the last line though. Yeah. But if we dare to have them again.
Yeah, I guess that's true, huh? Yeah.
Like they remember
that's true.
Something was there, but not like which powers they had or whatever. Yeah. Just they know that they bonded Radiant Spren at some point.
But I will say, David, the fact that you talked about the Isla Stele, about how forbidden, like, yeah, let's look at that, because that is, they come from another world using powers that we have been forbidden to touch, dangerous powers of Spren and surges. They destroyed their lands and have come to us begging. Oh, the Isla Stele is so cool, guys. Like it's all the stuff about Ashen being destroyed. I wonder how much of that, like, of Spren and surges, but it's like clearly they use some surges, right? So yeah, maybe honor is prohibiting them. Like maybe they didn't have the full suite of abilities, right? Like maybe it is just Stoneshaping and maybe a few others, maybe, right? Like I think that's totally plausible potentially.
In my head, and I don't think I got a chance to mention that earlier, but in my head, the Dawnsingers had powers that were more raw and unformed than what we see Surgebinders have. So you are a lot more bound by your, I'm going to use Cosmere terminology, but maybe it's not the right place for it. You're a lot more bound by your intent and what it is that you want to do. But the power level of what you can accomplish is lower. So like human radiants are raising towers. They're going high on the power scale, but they have very specific powers. Dawnsingers go wide. They can do a lot of different things, lots of flexibility, but none of these things are, we're going to reshape a mountain.
And this also sort of maybe ties back in with the rhythm stuff, because maybe the city Dawnsingers have these cymatic patterns, because when they just have to tune into the rhythm and sort of amplify it in order to create the city, while if they wanted to create a more like unique shape, or not unique, but a more unnatural shape, they'd have to put in more investiture or whatever.
Yeah, that could be very difficult to make it.
Yeah. So they just tune into the rhythm and sort of make constructive interference or whatever work, and that is what helps them create such large projects without having lots of power.
I sense some violent disagreement from David.
Yeah, I just don't think there's like in my head like the inherent difference between going wide versus going tall is not like a meaningful distinction.
Well,
like,
that's what I was trying to get at earlier. Yeah,
and so to me, I just think that like this, it's just like a hallmark of what the singers do. I don't know that we can say like, oh, they're just less powerful, but I think they've got a process where they probably stand in some sort of pattern and they all sing like just the right note and they're all on the same page and they're generating the same sound and they make this somatic pattern. But I don't think that like, I just don't think they were interested in building towers necessarily. Like, I don't think that was like outside the scope of
they probably
their
didn't
ability.
need it necessarily.
Because the humans can't make the Dawn cities with their powers. They could make something as, and like, we don't even know if they could make something as big. Like, that's the implication I've got from Brandon, is that it'd be pointless for a modern day Stoneshaper to try because it's just too much.
Yeah, it's tricky. So I'm wondering, with this using powers that we have been forbidden to touch, my first thing that I think of is odium stuff. That like honor and cultivation were like, no, you can't do that with like odium things. But like they do say with like Spren and Surges. So like impossible to know what the Ashen magic looked like because clearly there's Spren involved because it says it right there, right? But I wonder how much of that is odium stuff. And honor and cultivation were like, no, that is bad stuff. You guys, you are not allowed to do that. We will not allow that.
That's an interesting way to think about the powers we have been forbidden to touch, as opposed to like, because they've clearly got some powers they're allowed to use just fine, nobody cares about. So if they're saying specifically like we were told not to touch the odium stuff and they're using it, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But the way I read it, it sounds like this forbidding was in place before the humans arrived.
Yes.
And if that's the case, then what are these odium powers that the singers could ostensibly gain access to, but were forbidden?
I mean, open question if Void Spren were around, right? Like it could be as simple as odium is sending Void Spren and honor and cultivation are just like, no, you are not allowed to use the forms based off those or something. But like at the same
intelligent, like the intelligent Void Spren are definitely around, because I think that's a time period in which they are, they look like ancient humans for some reason, and that's probably because they were in contact with ancient humans first.
Yeah,
and so like certainly some Void Spren are around, in my opinion. But
at the same time, you have dangerous powers of Spren and Surges definitely gets into the sort of greater surge binding power that's super dangerous because they're talking about destroying the land of Ashen. Like, well, yeah, no crap, right? So it's tricky because I have this mental image of pre Nahel Bond surge binding that these singers are using. These Dawn singers are using these powers that's more flexible but less like bound, right? Maybe Honor had already limited Stoneshaping because he knew like, yeah, that microkinesis stuff, dangerous. Who knows what Honor did there, but not nearly as restricted as formalized surge binding, and certainly the Radiants are now. But at the same time, this is also the time period where surge binding is super dangerous, clearly, and Honor knows it because they blew up Ashen and ruined it, essentially. So I don't know how those can fit together, like how much power they were allowed to have, but not have the really dangerous stuff. And then I guess as the Desolations go on and the Spren start bonding with the humans, they're like, okay, we need rules in place because we don't want what happened with Ashen to happen. But I don't know. This is complicated and confusing, so I hope there's some good answers here.
What's confusing about talking about surge binding powered by odium as it was originally on Ashen? That seems very straightforward.
Human Voidbringers. What powers did they have? Is it void binding? We'll never know. Is Renarin stuff new? It is new. Oh, great. So what are the humans doing then? I don't know.
And how can we bring Dawn Shards into it?
How can we bring Dawn Shards into it? That'll really clear things up.
Definitely can.
But
Shards.
it is just really interesting. But I still think the way to go is the only mechanism that I can see of singers having these surge binding-ish abilities. I don't know if you'd even call it surge binding, is having forms with the Radiant Spren. And they just didn't know that Nahal bonds existed.
Yeah,
honor form and
like honor form. Yeah, sure, something like that. Sure.
Mm-hmm. I just think that the only thing that I have to say is really maybe the Spren was interested in showing her that, but like, you know, it really does show them stone shaping, but not them flying around or them using division or anything. So like, is it that they just had a the Spren is just talking about it as it relates to things that they're doing right now, or did they have access to other powers? Why wouldn't they?
Couldn't you just rationalize it as the stones seem to have a big affinity to this sort of surge and the users using it? So that's the things that the stone remembers. Much more so than if you like break a piece of the rock off, then it's like, okay, well, now I'm not connected with the rock anymore, right? With like division or something. Like it makes sense to me that the stone would probably focus on stone shaping in its memory, right?
Yeah, and like maybe maybe it makes sense because this is the reason they ultimately had to turn to Odium, because they had some sort of powers. The Spren got offended, would not grant them anymore, and they were suddenly really outgunned.
That's actually exactly what I think happened. Actually, I think that is a reason why they would go to Odium or these Void Spren or whatever, right? Like if you're in this first Desolation fighting the humans and you've offended the Spren severely, I don't know, maybe the Spren didn't want to fight the humans. I don't know. Impossible to say, really. But that would lead them to, no, we need some guns to fight back. And Odium's playing both sides, right? Like both the humans and the singers. Yeah.
Yeah. We need the Spren of Stones to tell us what happened, because it was there and it knows. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the spirits of stones so far, and there are a couple interesting Zeph mentions that indicate that maybe there's some cultural memory of the spirits of stones, / maybe they have interacted with them in more recent time frames than just Venli talking to them right now, or the more recent radiants that have been created. Mm-hmm. So going back all the way to the Way of Kings, we've known that the Spren hold stone as being sacred to them. Seth's got a mention in his interlude 6 of Way of Kings where they don't. He's
the Shin. You said the Spren.
We've been talking a lot about Spren. The Shin.
As far as we know, the Spren don't consider stone to be holy.
Well, they like obsidian though. They're big fans of that.
That's not wrong.
Yeah. Seth says, and yet they thought nothing of walking on stone or using stormlight for everyday illumination. They ignored the spirits of things that lived around them. And then he goes on to some other stuff. But later on in Words of Radiance 88, when Nail is confronting Seth after he's died and then was unfortunately brought back to life. Great 2 minutes there. Seth says to Nail, "My gods are the spirits of the stones," Seth whispered, "the sun and the stars, not men." And then Nail responds, "Nonsense. Your people revere the Spren of the Stone, but you do not worship them." So that's a pretty good little bit of Shin culture that we know, is that they revere the Spren of the Stones.
It's just weird. The spirit of stones, and then Zeth's like the sun and stars. I'm like, those seem like super different things, but you know, hey.
Yeah, that's also an interesting little aside there. But it gets into the concept we've seen a couple times so far, which is that Urithiru in some way has stones unhallowed. Is that my understanding?
Yeah. That's a place that the Shin can walk. Yeah.
And the Shin can walk on it for whatever reason, which is interesting because this is where Venli is talking to something. And you're like, but there is a spirit here. So is it just a cultural thing? Is it based on anything in reality? But when Seth goes to hang out in Urithiru and pout in Words of Radiance, he says he's like sitting there and like thinking to himself, he had fought an impossibility, a man with stormlight, a man who knew the storm within. That meant problems. Years ago, Seth had been banished for raising the alarm. The false alarm, it had been said. The Voidbringers are no more, they had told him. The spirits of the stones themselves promised it. The powers of old are no more. The Knights Radiant are fallen. We are all that remains. All that remains, truthless.
This is very interesting.
This is very interesting.
Yes, it is.
For sure.
I hadn't. Obviously, I paid some attention to it when I first read the book, but not much, because we didn't know a lot. Now, knowing that the whole Voidbringers are no more, we've won, this entire piece of propaganda was entirely a herald fabrication. For the spirits of stones to promise that the Voidbringers are no more is interesting.
And I guess I'm not sure, like, did they actually talk to the spirits of the stones, right? But at the same time, if you have an honor blade that can use cohesion, then you totally can, right?
That's exactly what I kind of think. Is I wonder if we know they use the honor blades, we know that they were relevant. The religion is stone shamanism. They are the shamans.
That's true. Yeah.
That I think that they very easily could have been using the honor blade to commune with the stones, to get information. Why the stones are lying, that's a different question. If they are indeed.
The other option is that it's not the stones that are lying, it's the stone shamans.
Yeah, like the stones are telling them maybe some true things, but maybe the stone shamans are interpreting it maybe deliberately incorrect or just outright lying, perhaps.
Yeah. Well,
or maybe the stones don't know, like, wow, the Voidbringers are gone. This is really weird.
Mm-hmm.
They are gone.
They definitely could be wrong. They could definitely be wrong. I like the idea of the stone shamans deliberately not relaying the correct message, because it's got cool echoes with the hierarchy, and we know Seth is bringing justice to the leaders, and they do need to have done something unjust for that to work.
Ishar does say how much you trust Ishar is.
He's very trustworthy. He has always made good calls. Ask Nail.
That is true.
Great plan. He's the most sane of them.
True. He does say that by the time he got to the Shin kind of ruling people, I don't know if that necessarily means the stone shamans, they were worshipping the unmade and they were in their thrall, and Zeth's father thanked Ishar for like freeing him from what I assume was the unmade control, and by freeing him, he really means killing him, right?
Yeah. Mercy killing.
But like there could be something there, right?
Maybe what they thought was the spirit of the stone was maybe an unmade that has stony powers. Yeah. Maybe.
That's
with Thunderclass, there is stone manipulation. That is a thing in the Odium army toolbox here, so it wouldn't be shocking to me.
What we've talked about on, I don't know when this podcast will air, but pockets of Void's friend that potentially hang around. What if they're talking to Underclass that are just like embedded in the stone, and they're like, we're just saying
that would be crazy
to people.
That would be crazy if they were like talking to like the spirit of a Thunderclast. Like that would be sweet.
I have no good reason to believe this, but my intuition tells me that the whole unmade Odium influence in Shinovar is a recent development.
It could be.
Yeah, yeah, at least with the unmade during this desolation, perhaps. But so that does lead to two options. If we think the unmade came more recently, prior to Zeth leaving, right? After Zeth left, excuse me. And so the stone shamans are punishing Zeth for sounding the alarm. Details unknown. See flashbacks in book 5, I guess.
They're coming.
Yeah. Then the stone shamans, is there an unmade there or not? Like, are the stone shamans actually talking to some spirits of stone, or are they lying out of their teeth? It's it's interesting.
I do think that it would be a mistake to say that, oh, well, it couldn't have been an unmade before time, like before Odium. We know they were around. We know they've had periods of activity and then dormancy. And I think that it's entirely possible, even when they're unconscious, where they come to rest. Like we know that Syanat needed her bond with Odium to think really well. She wasn't doing a lot till he was back. But for instance, with which one is the heart? It's not Kamorish.
Ashert Marn.
Ashert Marn. With Ashert Marn, the palace was already becoming a place of indulgence and overspending before Odium showed up, and they all started walking around in circles.
Yeah, before the Hour Storm.
Weird. And so I think that like an Unmade can be inactive, like hanging out somewhere, and still be passively influencing it, and that influence can become active.
Well, sure. How else are they going to influence the Devar household? Because there's a lot that maybe there's some unmade influence there.
There's Kamorish is sleeping underneath the house.
It's in the basement.
But yeah, like maybe Digonarthus like caused the scouring or something of Amia. I don't know. Unclear.
He's just shooting for.
We're getting very spicy very quickly.
Yeah, but there's definitely room for the Unmade to be doing things potentially, but not like in the super intelligent Janat way, right? Like obviously Moloch was doing stuff, right? Like we see that. The Thrill was doing things just sort of passively, right? Like that was totally a thing, right?
It is also a very common trope in literature to have, and I'm sure there's a TV tropes page for that. I just don't know what it is. To have like the ruling class or the advisors or whatever that are ostensibly in charge of communicating with a king, a deity, or whatever, to be communicating one thing to the people when they are sometimes not even talking to whoever is supposed to be on the other side. So like, oh yeah, the Spren of Stones totally told us.
The Voidbringers are gone.
In fact, they also told us that whoever says that the Voidbringers are not gone should give us money.
Yeah, right. Please donate money.
It always circles around, but
you know it would be funny if it was an Unmade that was sort of hibernating, and they're talking to this Unmade maybe via an Honor Blade. So like they are actually communicating with this Unmade, and the Unmade's like, yeah, the Voidbringers are gone. I don't know what the hell's going on. Like they've been gone a long time. They are not there, and that would almost make sense that the Stone Shamans would be like, yeah, the Voidbringers are gone. They told me they've been gone for like forever, and maybe the Unmade just doesn't have the context to know. Like, yeah, shouldn't they be back by now? Like, they're not back by now. Like, that's really weird, you know? Like, something like that.
They don't know much.
Yeah.
Maybe if we don't assume an Unmade.
Yeah, right.
Building the spirits of the stones, the Stone Shamans could have talked to the stones and found out that the humans, in fact, are the original Voidbringers. And it's just in their best interest not to tell the people that, because they want to keep up their religion and everything and their power.
That is that's possible. I mean, the stones presumably would have memory of honor and cultivation being like, "Foof, here's Shinovar," right? And like noting the humans being there and the change there, right? Like the stones would remember. So there probably are some things that they know that is not common knowledge.
Another interesting thing to consider, if we are departing away from the Unmade line of thinking for a moment, is kind of the Unkalaki origin story, in which
right, because they do talk to the Spirit of Stone. Yep, that's right.
The Horn Eaters, if you don't remember, Rock tells the story to Kaladin, I believe. And he says that his people way back were persecuted and pursued, and so they went to powerful beings to ask for help, and they went to the Spren of the Sky or Storms, but it's implied to be the Stormfather, and he wouldn't help them. And then they went to the Spren of the Sea.
Yeah, it was like a water one. Yeah.
Mhm.
There was water. I think there was water. There was nature.
There was there was a stone
I
one.
think,
There was definitely a stone one, a mountain one.
Mhm.
Who ultimately was like, okay, yes, I will allow you to be on my peaks, and then the water Spren is like, okay, well, I'll give you lakes.
That could just be cultivation, hilariously. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll put the perpendicularity there. Sure, why not? Like literally, like it could be, right?
But there is a Spren of Stones, Spren of Mountain type of entity in that story.
Mhm.
Not associated with Shinovar, apparently.
Not associated with Shinovar.
Oh, what I was going to say is I think it's interesting to think about where this stone tradition comes from for the Shin. And it wouldn't surprise me if this sort of reference for the Spren does date back to the singers in some way. And that could be a common thread between them and the Unkalaki, who have singer ancestry, that a general tradition where the Spren of large objects are respected.
The Ida Stele says, for the betrayal extended even to our gods to Spren, stone, and wind. So
There we go.
Stone and Wind. Yep.
yeah.
I always also had the idea that the people who stayed in Shinovar who didn't leave, they'd be like, no, you cannot cross the mountains and go to that stone. That is not a good idea. like I definitely think that's the Spren reverence, but I think the stone reverence, like you can't walk on stone, is probably like a disagreement with those ancient humans that it's like, no, that is a bad idea to go over that
It's
way.
out of our area.
Right, right. We're going to be faithful to what was promised to us, or something like that, right? Like that's where I think that tradition came from thousands of years ago.
I do like that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really plausible. I mean, we know that you can talk to mountains now, so you just need the right ability set. And it is maybe plausible that maybe Horn Eaters can commune a bit with some of these Spren. Perhaps, like you wouldn't necessarily need an honor blade. Obviously, if the Shin have the honor blade, you can do the stone shaping thing. So that's very plausible, right?
I mean, some Unkalaki straight up see Spren.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's not unreasonable that they maybe talked to some Spren.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a part of me wouldn't be surprised if we learned that this happened in the cognitive realm and they were walking around Shadesmar talking to the Spren more directly. But
yeah, that is very plausible. Yeah.
Although we haven't seen the Stormfather in the cognitive realm, and the High Storm is weird there, so I don't know.
No, we kind of saw him. We saw the shining, sparkly opalescent.
We see. Although presumably, like the other Spren talk to him sometimes. So
yeah, he probably does. That's a good point. I wonder what that's like. If it's Wizard of Oz, like his head just like appears. He's here.
I mean, not to get totally off task, clearly the Stormfather would have a capital C connection with those Spren, and probably maybe could just like send thoughts directly. But what are the extent and restrictions of that? Like, does it need to be during the high storm going through Shadesmar? Probably, like that tends to be when the Stormfather gets to do things, right?
Yeah, I bet it's when he passes over them, he would be able to talk to them.
Yeah.
That would make sense to me.
Yeah. This stuff with the ancient past of Roshar is so good, and honestly, even just these little hints. I want to do a Zeth and Shinovar episode because there's a lot of weird stuff. I don't know how long that episode's going to be because we don't have a lot. And we've been waiting for this podcast, waiting for this book, Stormlight 5, to finally get some Zeth flashbacks and some frickin' answers, because they clearly really didn't want the Voidbringers and the Radiants to be back. And like, what did Zeth see and things like that? Like, that's all interesting.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, it's interesting too that one of the other things the Spirits of the Spren says is that the Knights Radiant are no more. It's not just So I think that's another interesting thing for them too. If they're saying it, another interesting piece of information to have been provided.
Yeah, like it's not like the Stone Shamans. Like the Stone Shamans definitely know things. Like they're not just making everything up. Like I feel like they have talked to something at least at some point, like maybe it is a hierarchy thing where it's just like been passed down to generations, and maybe a long time ago they talked to a Spirit of Stone and maybe they don't commune with them currently. Oh, that's totally plausible. But it seems like they do know facts, and like if they know how to use the honor blades really well, I mean, like they totally knew things that is unclear to us
That's
currently.
a good point.
Fascinating. This is all just fascinating. But what's even more fascinating than Shinovar and what's going on in the near past with them is the distance past of that first Desolation time period. That is in Dawnsinger times, that is spicy stuff. What were the Spren forbidden to touch? Put your comments below and what you think the Spren were forbidden to touch. From the Eyeless Delay. Boom. That's your job. Any closing thoughts on this?
I was trying to think of a way to fit the Shinjas in the whole thing, but I don't think they're relevant. one thing that might be.
Do you want to
relevant,
explain Shinja just for people who are unaware of that wonderful turn of phrase?
No, I would like them to pick a fizz. No, so the Shinjas are the Shin ninjas, which is an affectionate term given to the people, presumably the Stone Shamanate, who are so in the lore of the world, Zed thinks that if someone kills him and takes his honor blade, the Stone Shamans will send people and they will just retrieve the honor blade. That's
right. They took that's
they
terrifying.
will retrieve the honor blade back. And the way he thinks about it is super casual. Like they're just gonna go and find someone who wields an honor blade and just grab that, no problem. And so the Shinjas are in charge of doing that.
Shin ninjas. Love it.
Anyway, so I couldn't find a way to fit that in. But ironically, we've now found a way to fit that in. The thing that bugs me is during the confrontation with Ishar in Rhythm of War. Ishar tells Zeth, among the things that we already talked about, that the Shin just welcomed me and they gave me my blade back, to which Zeth says, no, they would never give you the honor blade back. They are keeping the blades away from you.
Huh. Does he really?
Is that how that went? What? I gotta look at that.
I mean, obviously I'm paraphrasing, but that's
I definitely remember they wouldn't have given it to you, but I don't remember like the explicit.
Let's take a look. Let's take a quick look because I think the wording might matter there. So Zeth says,
"We're not going to return your weapons to you."
Yeah. So there may definitely be an implication, like we're not going to return your weapons to you. That I can see how you have that implication. Not explicit though, so that is important.
Fair. That's fair.
But I like the implication that it's like, no, these heralds, they're crazy. Don't give them their blades back. That's not a good idea.
It is noteworthy for sure that they wouldn't return them.
Either that or the Shin culture religion dating back to the last Desolation has a thing where maybe the heralds were like, hey, you guys, you keep an eye on these blades. Don't let anyone take them, including us.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, sure.
It could have been
because like the Shin did grab them from the thing.
It has been my headcanon, and there's, I think, virtually no substantiation in the text for that. But I believe that the ring of blades the heralds left was somewhere in Shinovar, and so the Shin built like a not a temple necessarily, but like a cultural center around that.
Sorry, I wanted to make a joke, and that cultural center turned into a Feverstone Keep. No, not really. That's a joke. That's not.
Just throw all the mysteries in one place.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true. The setting doesn't really read much like Shinovar to me when you see the one.
Yeah, it's very stony, right?
Yeah. It's because it's the Sea of Spears that has since been flooded is where that happened. And you can wait for book 5 to find out that that's true.
The Sea of Spears.
So Feverstone Keep's still on the menu for that being that. Easy.
Well, I think we know that Feverstone Keep is in Erie, but
yeah, it's in the Silver Kingdom of Erie. Yeah, it totally is. Okay. If that's all we got, why don't we head on over to Who's That Cosmere Character?
This character is from Roshar.
Menace. Tien.
Tom.
Braze.
Void in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw. All right, welcome to Who's That Cosmere Character, the game show where you send 5 clues in the character to wtcc at 17shard.com. I read these clues aloud, and after each clue, these guys have a chance to guess who's that Cosmere character. This is going to be solely from our priority queue because there are too many of these. So I'm going to go do 2 of these from the priority queue. Yeah, so support our Patreon. You can pay as low as $1 a month for art polls and behind the scenes content. But if you want to get Who's That Cosmere characters in much sooner than others, then you got to pay $10 for our heralds on Patreon, and you'll see your name at the end of the episode. Wow, so fun.
You also have to give your blade to some Shin people.
Yeah, the Shinjas will come find you.
They will not give it back.
Yeah.
They will not give it back. No, absolutely not.
You would have to kill them.
Yep. This first one is sent from Greyhive. And clue 1, I am not invested.
I mean, none of us are Greyhive.
These are in the first person here.
Okay.
Is it stick?
It's not stick. Good guess.
Well, it's got to be an inanimate object because all people are invested in the Cosmere.
All people have invested, yeah.
Does not have access to an Arcanum.
You should interpret it as Paleo just said and not include the latent investiture. How about that? It may or may not be an inanimate object, but I think you are limiting things too much, and you will see why with clue 2. How about that?
I can't guess the band this morning. Okay.
I mean, you cut.
I guess they are invested. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's guess something dumb. The Kolinar Palace.
Look, this isn't Where's That Cosmere location, unfortunately.
Look, we almost had a conversation with the Kolinar Palace.
It's a fair point. Fair point. It's not the Kolinar Palace.
Okay.
Damn it. I was so confident.
How about Menace?
It's not Menace, but that's good. I like it. Clue 2, I am married to a stout woman. So that will help.
So probably not the palace.
I don't think so.
Look, maybe the palace and Eurythera are in a relationship. You don't know. No, but the sibling wouldn't be a stout woman. So no, that doesn't work. Maybe the Kolinar Palace is in a relationship with another building in another Dawn city.
Yeah, like Thalen City. With the National Reserve. The National Reserve of Thalen City is the sugar mommy of...
Okay. I'm trying to think of characters now.
So I don't
Evgeni's just trying to sabotage this completely with locations.
I am here for the shenanigans, not for the game.
She's stout, but General Carl?
It's not General Carl.
I don't know if his wife is stout or not.
What about Tozbek? I don't remember her either.
It's not Tozbek.
Not a lot of stout women in the Cosmere, are there?
I don't know if that's accurate necessarily.
I mean,
what is a stout woman?
What does it mean to be stout?
Not the most flattering adjective to use.
No.
I remember virtually nothing of her, but I am gonna guess The husband of Yokska.
Oh, I thought you were gonna go with like the ardent pair in the way of King's Interlude that we always
That
end up.
was Garanid and the one that I always forget. I was thinking about that for clue 1.
Nice. No, it's not the husband of Yaksa.
Does he have a name?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
I don't know.
Clue 3, I am retired. This character is retired.
What about the guy who is Dalinar's Huntmaster? Is he married? Can't remember his name.
With B? Something with B
It starts
Bastion
with
or
a B.
whatever?
Bastion.
Bashir.
No,
Bashir.
that's a character from Deep Space Nine. That's someone else. No, it's not Bastion. And also, I don't know if Bastion's married. I don't think so.
I feel like he actually wouldn't settle down with the thing, but yeah.
Kayan?
It's not Kyan. He's retired.
No,
That's true. Yeah.
He's the stealth one in the relationship.
He is the stealth one in the relationship. That is also true. Yes.
I'm gonna lean on so many technicalities here.
Oh, great. Those are my favorite.
By guessing Claude.
No.
Oh, but he's invested though.
And Schultz isn't.
He is by definition invested.
He is by definition invested.
He's
That's
less invested than a regular person, I assume.
what does it mean to be invested in the Cosmere? Like, there's levels, you know? Of heightening. Okay. You all guessed. Yeah, you all guessed. Clue 4. I am famous and well respected in my octant.
Oh, man.
Oh,
What about Lord Peterus?
It is Lord Peterus.
Yeah.
Da-da-da! Clue 5 was I was killed by the main antagonist of my book.
yeah. I was gonna say that's the idiot that talked back against Miles, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Died.
Was it a
Excuse
wedding
me,
or a party?
The man who was willing to stand up.
Oh yeah, because he was a soldier 20 years ago or whatever, and had a
He was
gun.
a constable. He was he had just retired as a constable after
and he
catching
just
the
retired.
Commerce Strangler.
I think it makes sense, and it's a brave thing for Lord Peterus to do, to stand up for the right thing.
Especially since
that's-
these people aren't coming back. Like, it's not like they're going to get released with a hostage, with a ransom in 3 hours. They're just vanishing. So,
That's a good point. It's a good point. Nice. This next one is from Psycho. Clue 1.
Concerning.
Yep. Great Herald, though. But, I mean,
they all are.
they all are. They all are. All the Heralds are psychotic. We love Heralds on Patreon. Yeah, that's a joke. Not. Clue 1. This character killed a lot of people.
Let's go with a herald. How about Nail?
It's not Nail.
Probably not.
How directly does it have to be that character killed them?
I hope we'll find out in
Because you
following
could-
clues.
You could argue that Sazed killed a lot of people when he.
You could argue
But
that.
I won't.
Is that your guess?
No, it's.
That would be pretty mean of a clue. That'd be pretty sweet.
This character is a war criminal. Killed a lot of people. The Stormfather.
It's not the Stormfather. He did kill a lot of people.
That's a good one.
Mhm.
Because you wouldn't like immediately go to that, but like the Stormfather is responsible for many, many, many deaths.
He doesn't feel that bad about it.
No, he absolutely doesn't.
I mean, how responsible is he?
Silence is my guess.
Not
Ooh.
Silence Montaigne. Nice. Clue 2. This character played a protagonist.
Wait, in a play or like tricked them? Or you're not gonna specify.
It's more because I think this clue is vague.
What about Tonk Fa?
It's not Tonk Fa. So because I'm uncertain, I'm just not going to say anything. I would love to be able to specify more clearly. How about that?
There's not a lot of play acting in the Cosmere, to be fair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's like one of the actors that are in the Hero for All Ages play, and we're definitely not going to get that. They probably people.
It's what was he called? The ape guy?
Ape Manson?
Manton. Okay.
What?
Yeah.
What?
He's
Oh, this is one of those era 2 like Ape Man. I do kind of remember that name. Yeah.
he's one of Suit's distractions for Wax.
Yeah.
Played a protagonist.
Or is there a protagonist that's an instrument that's getting played? I'm trying to think.
I don't know. Either.
I'm just imagining a Spren that manifests as an instrument, and this person is playing the manifestation of that Spren. That'd be really fun.
Not
And that Spren's a
implausible.
protagonist, so it's still right.
Yeah.
Stormlight 9 spoilers, by the way.
Shard drums.
But
I'm going to guess. I forgot it again.
Well done. Nice.
The Pursuer.
It's not the Pursuer.
Pussy.
Very nice.
Okay.
I did guess Bleeder, by the way.
Oh, it is Bleeder. Good job. It is Palm. I totally didn't even process that you even
I
said
didn't hear that at all.
No, I didn't. Sometimes
like 2
Discord
minutes
just like
ago.
selects
Okay.
who's loudest if there's multiple people
And
talking.
a Chandra can sort of play a protagonist as well if you want to.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
Clue.
That's a
it's
really
Lessie.
Yeah. Clue 3. Well, is Leslie a protagonist? I don't know. Clue 3. This character's death was mourned for by their lover twice. Potentially
was
more.
twice in there because
No. I added that. No.
How many times can we kill this character?
Yeah. Many times. Clue 4, this character's actions benefited the Lord Ruler. That's a fun Palm fact.
It's very true.
And Clue 5, this character interacted with characters who appeared in both Mistborn Era 1 and 2.
I mean, she was
because
she was Lord of the Rose Candra, so
Yeah, but the Lord Ruler didn't appear in Era 2, so that'd be like Sazed, I guess.
Oh no, I think it's not characters that appear in both, but both in Era 2 and Era 1
Yeah,
is
with
where they
characters from
interacted.
both eras.
Yeah.
So the one from Era 1 is the Lord Ruler, and the one from Era 2 is everyone that she interacts with in
No.
Era 2.
yeah.
This character interacted with characters who appeared in both Mistborn Era 1 and 2.
Oh,
I think I'm still reading it the way
yes.
I said.
Okay.
They're interacting with characters that appeared
Okay,
in
then it,
Era 1 and characters that appeared in Mistborn Era 2.
but says it would work.
Yeah, Sazed
As,
first.
like,
Anyways, Palm, we didn't need to
No,
argue
she
about the
didn't-
details.
She didn't interact with him in Era 1, but he appears in
appeared.
both
He
Era
appeared
1 and
in
2.
both eras. That's right. That's what it said.
Yeah.
Interacted with characters
that makes way less sense to me, but okay.
Psycho, put your comments in the Shardcast chat because I know you're there about what you think. We definitely won't remember this by the time this airs, but there you go.
I'll be watching.
We'll be watching. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Come to us on 17char.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun when we get the site up. It should be up by then.
Yeah, hopefully by
Hopefully.
now it's working.
It's literally June, and the site is currently down with reasons. But by the time you have it, it should be up probably.
unless it's down again.
Unless it's down again.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know.
We should schedule a downtime.
Just do a reenactment of the recording experience.
just
Please ping Eric if
just
the site
power
is
off
down.
the server. I'll just have to remember to power off the server when I post this podcast.
Yeah. That's dedication.
Anyway,
man.
you can come there for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun. You can also go to Discord, though Discord does also have some downtime. That does happen sometimes.
That's true. Yeah.
But Discord
Nothing we
is
can do
also
about it.
a heaps of fun. Yeah, that's not our fault. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, YouTube. You can support us on Patreon for as little as $1. And I don't know where this outro was going, so I guess I'll just say bye.
Peace.
Bye.
I don't know how to Stone Shape an outro, so
Caw.